That's how. All right, good morning, gang, and welcome to the Aired Out podcast on the web at airedoutVT.com. Streamed everywhere you get your podcasts on Facebook and YouTube, where we are live on this beautiful Wednesday morning. Wellness Wednesday from Washington County Mental Health is today. The 16th, yes. Central Vermont is talking about it. If you have not been, you should really consider it and make this tonight, 4:30 is when it starts over on Summer Street. Make this the first one. Get over there, get a massage, do some acupuncture, acupressure. They do all of this. It's for our community. It's for free. When I say they, I'm talking, of course, about Washington County Mental Health, and they've been doing this for a long time. We're talking about 6,000 Vermonters who have benefited from Washington County Mental Health just in the last year alone. So, in some capacity or another. So, they're wonderful. Get over there. Find them on Facebook, WCMHS, and get over to Wellness Wednesday, 23 Summer Street. Today, 4:30 until 7. It is National Support Your Local Chamber of Commerce Day today. And I just have to say here at the Aired Out Podcast that we are constantly recognizing the value of our relationship and our membership with the Chamber of Commerce. We love them. If your business is not a member, you ought to consider it. Give them a call, 229-5711, and get on their site, centralvt.com. Killington's got the snow guns running this morning. We're going to have a cloudy one for the most part today, maybe a shower or some wet snowflakes, depending on where you are. Lower 40s only for the high today. I don't know if you've fired up your wood stove yet. If you have one, I haven't yet, but I think this weekend, probably going to happen. Tonight, 30 with a few clouds. Thursday, sunny and 55. Weekend looks good, too. Friday and end the weekend, sunshine and 60s. So there you have it. Birthdays today, Jen Giacalone Furlong, Eric Chittenden, Bill Sayer, James Manuli, Tiffany Kilburn, Doug Roon, Sam Fisk, John Healy, and Alicia Bartlett. Dan Moland is standing by this morning over at the Hope Coalition on Vine Street, 297 Vine Street to be exact, in Berlin. Dan, you've been, I told you were going to fill more than one truck, buddy.
Yeah, you warned me.
I told you.
Yeah, but we continue to both get requests from down south and to get very generous donations, and so we're glad to be the middlemen in that and just facilitate making that thing happen for people.
So that first truck pulled out of town, I think, Monday?
It went to Bennington on Monday, and they drove down on Tuesday. That very same truck will be back here on this weekend to get reloaded.
Wow. All right. So how many trucks are we talking about here? I've lost track.
It's easy to lose track. We intended to fill one truck, which we did on Sunday, and loaded that thing up. But we had so many donations, we had more than half a truck left. So they sent up a second truck, which we totally filled, still had stuff left. So we've got a third truck that is going to be coming up this weekend to be loaded. And even that truck, I hate to say it, we're about half full right now. So we've got another half to go. But we anticipate filling that truck up. I also have a 2/3 of a truck that's full with hay. And there's a lot of farmers down south that are really hurting. And I've heard of farmers down south and horse owners that have been having to put their animals down because they can't get hay. And that's a real tragedy. And so we want to help them out as well. So that's where we're at. Well, ultimately, we're looking at probably 4 trucks.
All right.
Don't say anything.
So 4 trucks total, you think?
I think 4 trucks total is what we're looking at this point.
All right, and we're talking about big trucks here, tractor trailers. Till 4 o'clock this afternoon, you're collecting donations. Nothing food, though. No food. You've got the complete list of everything that you guys are accepting at the Hope Coalition on the Hope Coalition Facebook page right there.
Yep, it's on the Hope Coalition Facebook page, the Enough Ministries page, and on the Aired Out page.
Thank you very much, buddy. Listen, I appreciate your partnership. We're going to continue to promote this. You're going to be collecting donations every day this week from 10 till 4. And then if there's any additional information as we go into and through the weekend, you'll, of course, be letting me know, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. Super appreciate all the Central Vermonters who have already dropped off so many wonderful donations and continue to do so. And I think it's just a great effort from the folks in Central Vermont to help out those who came and helped them out first.
Yeah.
Right?
Well said.
Folks from North Carolina were the first people to come up here and help us with our flooding 2 years in a row. And so this is a great way that we can help repay a little bit of that friendship and help them out in their time of need. So I'm grateful that we're able to do that.
So proud to live here. Vermonters, really, Dan, don't surprise me with the turnout on this. I mean, it's remarkable, but it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible and just very heartwarming. It's interesting on, I don't know about your Facebook page, but on my Facebook page, we have a number of people from North Carolina that are commenting on the Facebook page. Thank you, Vermonters. Thank you for helping us out. Thank you for your prayers and whatnot. And so that's awesome, right?
Yeah, it really is. It's incredible. Dan, we're going to check with you again real soon, I promise.
Okay, sounds great.
All right, buddy. That's Dan Moland, right there from the Hope Coalition. What a remarkable man. And how incredible it is that you have done what you have done, Vermont. Vermont State Police, and we're following some of these stories. All of these stories are posted on the Aired Out page to read more from Digger and Times Argus, PTZ, CAX. We've got them all. The big story here in Vermont this morning, probably the biggest, is that state police have released the names of the victims in the fatal shooting that happened in Waterbury on Monday. The man who died was 34-year-old Sean Spiker, 34 years old. from New Hampshire. The surviving victim is 36-year-old Michael Perry from, well, right here in the Granite City of Barrie. No one is currently in custody. Police say they are still working to identify a suspect, but boy, I'll tell you what, we're going to be watching this story very carefully. Hey, the State House is back open after being closed for a couple of days from a burst pipe. We've got that story on the page as well. North Country lawmakers fed up with the new Amtrak delays that are coming down the rails. That story is on there. Police investigating the Woodstock police chief following a report of his involvement in an incident. Joe Swanson, he's on paid leave. We have that story for you as well. Vermont spending on education, $400 million more than what's needed, according to a third-party study. We have that story on the page this morning. And new emergency shelters are popping up everywhere in Vermont with the motel vouchers program. Lawrence Seiler has more. Good morning, buddy.
Good morning. Hi to everybody in the Aired Out community. This is extremely important. According to WCAX, there are new, and according to, as a matter of fact, according to Montpelier, there are new shelters that are popping up due to the hotel vouchers. Now, just to let me backtrack here. This is very important. As of November 1st, there will be 3 new shelters. One in Montpelier, one in Middlebury, and one in Williston. In terms of that, so let me just backtrack here. The city has learned that the state of Vermont is working to set up 3 new shelters for homeless families with children. This year, the new caps on the state hotel motel program went into effect, leaving at least 21 homeless kids that state officials were aware of. They're now told that in Waterbury, the new Armory building in Williston, and the former state police barracks in Montpelier is vacant for those shelters. They don't know the cost of the shelters, but the physical footprint will look, and they'll find out what it looks like. They're looking to have them up by November 1st. Though the state is looking for a provider at the Williston location, I'll keep the Aired Out community abreast of this. As a matter of fact, tonight, City Council of Montpelier is having a special homeless workshop. So nobody wants to miss that.
Yeah, I did hear about that. Thank you so much, Lawrence. You're doing a great job. Vermont Coyotes are coming to Barrie. The press conference at the auditorium yesterday, unbelievable. Great crowd there as we welcome our new head coach, Jesse Palmer, and our general manager, Chris Bedore. So exciting. And if you missed that press conference last night, the media was there. They were all there. PTZ, CAX, 2244. We've got it for you. It's right on the Aired Out page. We've got the whole thing for you if you did miss that. The headline in the WCAX story that came down yesterday, now, I don't know if you've had a chance to read this, but the headline was "A Pause on the Green Rush. Vermont no longer accepting retail cannabis applications." For the Cannabis Control Board, we encourage you to hop on ccb.vermont.gov and familiarize yourself with the Cannabis Control Board, who they are, and exactly what they're doing. Not doing per month or per week, but doing daily, and sometimes maybe even hourly. Kyle Harris is the commissioner. I want to welcome you to our microphones, to our studio. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. It's exciting to be here this morning.
I say hourly because I'm guessing that this is such a fast-moving pace of what's happening in Vermont that your phone is ringing. Things are happening, literally, can happen by the hour.
I would certainly agree with you a little bit there. You know, I've been in this job for about 3.5 years, but every couple months it changes and the focus changes, and it's trying to stay ahead of, you know, along with the headline that you read, ahead of market saturation to the point where prices bottom out, and all of the small businesses that have built this industry's built on the back on are no longer viable, and that's one of the things that we're trying to take a breath, kind of assess where we are, and figure out how we can kind of continue to move forward.
Sure. Before we dive deep on this, just a little bit about who you are and how you became the commissioner of the Cannabis Control Board here in the Green Mountain State.
Sure. Well, let me start by saying that there are 3 commissioners, so I don't want to take credit for being the sole one. It's myself, Julie Holbert, who's also a commissioner, and then James Pepper, who is a commissioner and does sit as the chair of the board. For me, myself, I grew up in Maryland. I did not grow up here. I first came here in 2012 to attend Vermont Law School. And I just fell in love with the kind of sense of community up here and how folks kind of go about their business up here. I graduated with a law degree, a master's in environmental policy, did the whole DC rat race for 4 to 5 years in the agriculture space. And my wife and I decided that we missed Vermont and wanted to come back up here. I was working for the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets as a ag business development specialist. In 2019, I was doing a lot of connective tissue with the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, making sure that certain ag enterprises are not left behind as it relates to kind of how we can kind of do what we can to support the economic development of Vermont-based businesses. And so a lot of that experience, I had some folks encouraging me to apply when the governor, sent out a call for applications for the Cannabis Control Board. And after many, many interviews with a lot of different folks, I got the call from Governor Scott that he was going to offer me a position on the board. And, the 3 of us started. I always say this on my personal Zoom account. We had no state cell phones, no nothing. We're like, okay, what do you do? So it's kind of, we've had to figure out how to build an agency and also build the infrastructure around a regulated market and encourage market participation in the way that we wanted it to feel and look like other Vermont-oriented businesses, and not just 3 or 4 big businesses controlling the contours of the market. So it was really kind of felt like starting like an NGO in the government space. So it's been a wild 3.5 years thus far, and I don't think we've nearly accomplished what we hoped to set out to accomplish when we first were seated. There's some strong indications that the market is healthy in some ways, and I think we're looking for other ways to continue to improve the viability of small businesses. Yeah,
and we're going to talk about that. Everyone and their brother has an opinion about this. You've heard, I'm sure, so much from Vermonters, and we're already hearing from Vermonters this morning who are posting in comments here. But I want to just start out with this story here on WCAX, because it just hit yesterday. And I'm quoting here, in just under 2 years, Vermont has issued just over 90 retail cannabis licenses. But now Vermont's Cannabis Control Board has the power to write rules to influence geographic distribution based on population. A decision by the CCB to stop accepting new retail applications may be a signal of the end of the era. The chair, James Pepper, who you just mentioned, is quoted in the story saying, "We had a concern that once we started articulating what our plans were for retail establishments, it might exacerbate this problem of retail saturation." Break this down for us here in layman's terms.
Sure.
What this means. This was a story that kind of hit tail end of September, I think, the 27th maybe.
We announced it at our, so we have a board meeting every month. It's typically the last Wednesday, I believe, in every month. So yeah, right around, I don't know what date that was, at the end of September, we announced, we took public comment, and we kind of announced what we were thinking, and we voted to pause retail licensing. And if I back up a second, I can kind of help listeners understand how we kind of arrived at this. So every state does this differently. And some of the lessons I think our legislature learned from other states is, anytime a lot of other states have limited licenses or a lottery system to determine who's going to get certain licenses, and they are so legally fraught, and it's easy to find corruption rippling through a lottery system or anytime you score any type of application to understand who's going to receive that license. So in Vermont, we have an unlimited licensing structure. We don't have licensing caps. If up to this point, if you met our application requirements and you went through the background check process, you paid the fee that the legislature determines is the appropriate fee for a retail establishment, you have gone through the municipal zoning oriented things that businesses need to do. You've went through fire safety. We will hand you a license, and you can put out your shingle, and you can do this for yourself. The one caveat that we think has really exacerbated a lot of the kind of saturation issues that we've seen is Vermont is what's called an opt-in state. So every municipality needs to opt in on a Australian ballot if they want to host retail cannabis establishments. And I think to date, don't quote me on this number, I want to say only like 70-ish municipalities in the state have decided that they are willing to host such establishments. And that really kind of controls where retail establishments are and exacerbates saturation. To this date, till June, when the latest act giving us the ability to develop rules around retail saturation came into effect, we didn't have the ability to deny a license, even if they were the 15th retail establishment in any municipality. And we are in the process of drafting rules. We're kind of discussing them with our general counsel, this month as we speak, and they will be released for public comment probably in the next couple weeks, I would imagine, month, on a starting point of what we consider to be saturation as it relates to the number of inhabitants of a given town. I think one of the problems that we've seen is folks still want to be the 15th dispensary in Burlington when there are so many small towns across the state that would be serviced by having a dispensary in their town. And folks would rather enter a crowded market than go out and find where that space is for them. And so how do we, in compounding issues like that, South Burlington hasn't opted in. Williston hasn't opted in. So everybody's kind of situating themselves in a place like Burlington or Winooski or Essex.
Sure.
And, because these towns have not opted in, it kind of exacerbates that problem. And I think as we look at writing rules and we're developing rules and we're taking public comment on them, it's easy to see how some might take advantage of trying to figure out what we're thinking before it's actually finalized. And so what we want to do, and again, this is a pause. As soon as the rulemaking process can take 6 months, just with all the procedural steps you need to do in order to kind of move a rule from drafting phase through the appropriate channels and have it finalized. After we move through all of those necessary steps, which is, there are multiple points along the way for the public to weigh in on whether or not they think what we're thinking works or doesn't work. And we will respond to every public comment, every unique public comment, to explain why we think that's a good idea or not a good idea. We'll open retail back up, and just trying to find ways to encourage folks to kind of put out that shingle in towns that don't already have this problem.
Sure. Got a question here already. Will there be an extension on applications that were given to folks a year ago due to loss of their homes? As we know, availability for places to rent are very few and expensive. Can you answer to that?
I'm a little unclear at what the question's specifically referencing.
I'm guessing beyond the November cutoff here is.
So if you already have a retail establishment, it doesn't mean that you can't renew. So if your renewal is up in December, January, February, March, you can still renew. It's initial licenses. It's new licenses that we're pausing. So
got it.
So for instance, we announced this at the end of September. There were folks already trying to move through the process that had taken necessary steps beyond just the initial application. We're giving them, I think, until November 15th to kind of complete their application. But this doesn't impact renewing a license.
Okay.
And, you know, if there is somebody out there who is still feeling those impacts of losing their commercial space from the flooding the last 2 years, I definitely encourage you to reach out to our licensing team. They'll be able to help you there. But it's really about initial licenses. We did a whole market analysis at the beginning of this. Once we were seated, you know, I went through how we kind of had to figure out an office space, phones, computers, like building a staff. But we also worked with a cannabis specific market development style agency that kind of did an economic analysis on how many stores we think we needed to satisfy demand in Vermont, and how much square foot of cultivation we thought we needed to satisfy demand in Vermont without an oversupply, which would crash prices. And we are already 15 to 20 stores over what the market analysis thought we would likely need to satisfy demand. And again, we're not viewing this as through the lens of, oh, that market analysis has said this, therefore we cannot do this anymore. But we want to update this market analysis. Was the supply-demand analysis correct? You know, we're clearly performing well by one metric, which is the tax revenue we've generated. That doesn't mean that the market is as healthy as the numbers say that it is, though. So how do we kind of spread this out a little bit more equitably throughout the state versus these centralized spots where there's over 5 dispensaries in a town of under 6,000 people? Is that viable? And where's our role as an agency? And I think that's one of the things we've struggled with before we had this new authorization from the legislature to look at these through this lens. Like, who are we to say, you know, your business is not viable because you're the 5th person in a municipality? At the end of the day, business is business, and competition is healthy to a certain extent. But if we think about it in terms of like liquor, because I hear that a lot, you know, there's only 80 some odd liquor stores in the whole state, you know. They're really careful with where they grant a liquor license to sell liquor. And, you know, that's why they're not on every corner. So there's some tools that we've been given, and we want to figure out ways to continue to encourage new entrepreneurship in this market while still protecting the folks that have taken the leap of faith with us.
Yeah. I remember well when we had our first retail cannabis store open up in Vermont. And, man, that was like... Was that Pandora's box? You know, I mean, I just said, well, here we go. Buckle up, because they're going to be coming out of the woodwork now. I mean, and we've got a very successful one right here in the Granite City. Forbin's Finest is incredible.
Yeah, Nick and Angela are great people.
They're great people, and they're so educated with this kind of stuff. I mean, they're really sharp people.
They are.
They know what they're doing.
They absolutely do.
Yeah, and we've got another one coming soon to Barrie. I want to drop a quote here from James Pepper. from WCX, and I want to get your take on this. He says you can't get a bank loan to start a cannabis company. You can't have a line of credit to make ends meet at the end of the month. If you're short on cash, you don't have bankruptcy protection. You have to pay exorbitant taxes. You can't write off the normal business expenses that you would if you had any other type of business. And so you kind of stack all of those up. It's a very challenging market. There's some big risks here. What say you about that quote from Pepper?
I think it's something that we take very seriously, and we certainly acknowledge the leap of faith that a lot of folks have taken to enter the market because it's federally illegal. It's still even if cannabis has kind of in some corners of communities grown to be more of a Main Street oriented business, it is still federally a Schedule I controlled substance, which means federal institutions will not work with cannabis businesses. You cannot write off any business expenses like any other business would on your federal taxes. And I know folks that have emptied out 401ks, their life savings, in order to enter this market. And that makes me anxious, sure, because, at the end of the day, we live in a society that, is driven by competitive capitalism. So
Right.
we can do what we can through those bounds of, this is still federally illegal. And if we don't prioritize certain things from a regulatory perspective at the state level, we could be prioritized for, enforcement by the Department of Justice if we are not appropriately background checking people to keep this out of the hands of, folks with certain past criminal convictions that, that get at the embezzlement charges, the racketeering charges, and stuff
Sure.
like that. We have to do certain things, which is added costs and added regulatory expenses to a small business. This market looks so much different than any other market. There's not a lot of multi-state operators in this industry in Vermont, where elsewhere, the multi-state operators who can afford the cost of regulation a little bit more than a lot of the small folks can, because they can float along until something changes, perhaps at the federal level. I think we're very cognizant that availability really isn't present with a lot of small businesses in Vermont.
Yeah.
And we are constantly listening and trying to find ways to cut expenses while still making sure that we don't do too much that we upset our federal partners. And yeah, I mean, everything that Pepper said is accurate. And I think anybody who has a license through us would agree with him too.
I had stock in Canopy Growth and Kronos, number 1 and 2 players globally for the industry, and stock tanked.
Yeah.
Tanked. I mean, just absolute bombed. I don't know if you have stock in any
Well, I don't.
companies like this.
Just so for everybody listening, I don't have any stocks in anything that would compromise my ethical obligations to
there
the
you
state.
go.
But
Are you hoping the feds are going to legalize this?
Yeah. Well, yes. I think at least descheduling. I think if we deschedule cannabis and it no longer is a Schedule I substance, even if it moves to Schedule III, that alleviates some of those high regulatory burdens that quote that you read alludes to. Folks might be able to kind of do something with business expenses at the federal level and kind of work through their federal taxes a little bit easier. They might be able to get lines of credit. They can hold bank accounts with major multi-state national banks. And right now, like, a lot of it works through local credit unions.
Yeah.
Those fees and interest rates that you pay on those bank accounts would not be the same because they wouldn't be considered as high risk. So I think descheduling is a good first step. I think federal legalization is a really curious proposition. And I say that because right now, if you're unfamiliar with how cannabis works throughout the country, everything that you see or buy or consume, that you buy at a retail establishment at least, was grown here, was manufactured here. It happens all within the state. And Vermont's got a very special thing going on. And I don't mean that in the sense of I think we're doing everything perfectly. We can always improve, just like anybody can always improve.
Sure, of course.
But, I used to work in agricultural commodity markets. The things that they do is they collapse in on themselves, and it's a race to the bottom. 4 companies are going to control things if federal legalization goes, is what happens. And the more markets consolidate, the cheaper prices are going to be, and the bigger you need to be to survive. And so what does that mean for a small market like Vermont that prides itself on craft local products? I think there will always be a place for small craft local products and consumers that want to pay a premium in order to, consume what they consider to be a craft product. But there's going to be a lot of rough and choppy waters to pop out on the other side throughout that market consolidation. Because a lot of these big businesses, as you mentioned, there's, it is traded on the Canadian Stock Exchange too. A lot of those businesses are going to be able to sell product into Vermont a lot easier than they do now.
Wow.
It would allow Vermont businesses to export their products to other states, but I kind of almost think about it in the context of craft beer. Like 20, 30 years ago, how many craft beer options were there? Not a whole lot. A lot of folks, drank, and I mean, I'm 34, so, you can probably tell me more than I know, but, the options weren't there, and craft beer started chugging along, and now there are a plethora of options. But the palette in terms of how you spend with your dollars to get the taste and the value and the ABV that you want to buy now, it took a lot of time to kind of get there, right? Other than those few options. And I think there'll always be, the folks that just want the tall boy after work, the $1.99 option. There are folks that will pay $20 for a 4-pack of beer. But how long is it going to take to get there once it actually happens? I'm worried that so many small businesses won't be able to survive the couple years while everything consolidates to kind of develop the new craft market. So it's a hard question to answer. I think that there are steps that can help folks now while we figure that out.
It's a dance, and you've got to you guys have to. You can't be making decisions and then watching them unfold. You need to see with time going on. You need to see how things are unfolding.
And I think
and then make decisions.
And I think a part of the pause on licenses is an opportunity at the penultimate moment before things get too far away from us. There's other states where
it's
I
not
think
a stop.
It's
a pause.
Well, I think of Oklahoma or Oregon, where there's so much saturation, quote unquote, or supply that it drives prices down, which is great if you're just a consumer. But what does that mean to the small businesses that are relying on that price point to be viable? Then they fall apart. And then the market is only controlled by a couple big players. And so, we've been sprinting as an agency for 3.5 years. I think there's a lot of things we think we can do better, and this is an opportunity to take a pause, catch our breath, and figure out ways that we can do that and serve the folks that we license a little bit better.
And the CCB is watching the model, if you will, of Oregon very carefully.
Oh yeah, we talk to other state regulators often.
I'm sure. I had a rather interesting interaction with a grower locally here who said, "Oh, you can have the CCB on. Ask them if any of them are growers themselves, cultivators of this." I think he was kind of implying that maybe members of the CCB don't know firsthand how difficult it is to be in this industry from a growing standpoint. Have you? Can you answer to that?
Well, I can't say that I've grown at a commercial scale. I can't hold a license and be a commissioner. That's that's something I can't do. I home grow. Yeah. I'm happy to say that. That's perfectly legal to do here. I grew up on a farm. I've worked in agriculture. I know how hard agriculture can be. I've not grown cannabis at that commercial scale. But how far that goes with that specific person that you spoke with,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think there's a lot of presumptions about folks on the board. I am
Yeah.
a bureaucrat after all, and I sit at a desk. But I think we're a little bit more, hip to be with it than some folks think we may be.
I'm guessing that you're watching the medicinal industry in states like Maine and other states in New England versus the recreational relationship there very carefully. I mean, my God, you go over to Maine,
Mm-hmm.
they're everywhere. They're everywhere.
Yeah, and I mean, our medical market, I think if you look at it through most metrics, it's not serving folks that need it.
Yeah.
And we're the first to admit that. I think one of the things that folks are going to see if they're paying attention to how we are going to move forward through our proposed rules that we're going to
Sure.
release over the next month, we're going to do something that's called a medical use endorsement
Okay.
on a retail license. And so we're going to look through certain metrics to kind of help get more tax-free medical cannabis into current retail establishments.
Mm-hmm.
But to do so, they're going to need to come up with certain plans. Like, how do you, I've been in some of our medical dispensaries, and not everybody there is comfortable with the public knowing that they're consuming cannabis for a medical purpose.
Sure.
There's a lot of uncomfortability there. So I think
Stigma.
it's present no matter what any of us can do. But I think some of these kind of things and it's going to be more of like a la carte menu oriented way for retailers to kind of meet what we want them to do. Do you have special hours for medical patients? Do you have a separate exit and entrance for medical patients? Are you going to carry specific products that are only really present in the medical market?
Mm-hmm.
That are not as popular from a retail perspective, and they might clog your inventory for a while or sit on the store shelf. Like, are you willing to provide those services for folks? And I think we're gonna release some things we're thinking about on how certain retailers can kind of meet us halfway and kind of cater specifically to the medical kind of component of this. But from a qualifying condition on what is medical, the legislature controls that, and we've made some recommendations to the legislature, and we have another medical report we're submitting to the legislature before the session starts on some of those what we're thinking in terms of what will make this a better medical market.
There are so many moving parts here. There is so much to unpack. I'm guessing the CCB has discussions about not only how delicate and fragile this regulated industry can be, but also the relationship with the black market. And I mean, look what's happening. I mean, we hear all the time about cannabis that's laced with other substances in the black market. And I say to folks that are hesitant to embrace this industry, people are going to be smoking anyways, and hopefully they'll be smoking or consuming cannabis that is safely regulated.
Sure.
What say you about that?
Well, I think one of the things we've thought about a lot is how do we create a market if we're thinking about consumers and whether or not they want to use a regulated substance versus something they find on the illicit legacy market. What can we do to have them pick that, knowing that they're going to incur like a 20% tax on that?
That's it.
And that's really challenging.
Yeah.
To be frank, especially when you're trying to support small businesses, and the price is higher here than it is in Maine or in Massachusetts. And to folks that say that, I'm like, hey, I get that. But
Pepper
your money
says that almost anywhere in the country.
It's true. But I think what I hope folks recognize when they buy a Vermont product is you're supporting a small business. We don't have a lot of the big multi-state operators here where your money's just going to somebody's investment portfolio. You know, a lot of these companies, like the prices are higher here, notwithstanding the tax. You know, your money's going to a mom and pop oriented business that is right now out there trimming and bucking flower to get ready, you know, before the hard frosts come.
Yeah.
And they are very appreciative of you buying something at a retail establishment.
Sure.
On the flip side, you know, when it comes to cannabis businesses and how did we encourage legacy and illicit market operators to come into the regulated market, that's a whole other black box that we can wander into. And I kind of approach it like this when we were writing our regulations. I always thought, 20% of legacy market operators would come with us no matter what they did because they saw opportunity. 15% of them would never come no matter how easy we made it because there's a trust factor there, and I totally get it. This has been illicit and illegal for a long time, and you can't just flip a switch, make it legal, and expect everybody to come in with open arms screaming, "Yay, government." It's just not how it works, and the trials and tribulations that legacy operators have been through over the last 20, 30, 40 years, I'm not going to presume that I can fully appreciate all of the anxiety that's come along with that. But if I'm thinking about the middle 65% of those operators, I mentioned 20%, I mentioned 15%. If I'm thinking about the middle who were interested, they weren't sure, maybe under a certain set of circumstances, maybe I'll sit on the sidelines for a year and then come in. We really focused on trying to do what we could to encourage market participation by those folks. So, and again, I have one hand tied behind my back trying to do that because of its federal status. We need to do certain things. You need to be in good standing with the tax department. You need to go through background checking. You need to go through fire safety stuff if you're an indoor operator. There are so many things that we need to do, but how can we give you a sense of comfortability to the extent that we can as an agency? We don't have any sworn police officers on staff. Nobody carries a gun. A lot of our compliance team is educated in various different fashions of the industry, whether it's cultivating, whether it's retail security, whether it's, clean kitchens, from a health perspective. We've got a lot of different skill sets that complement our full agency. To provide, folks that comfortability that hey, this isn't the Department of Public Safety coming to inspect your establishment. These are, we're an agency.
Bigger spectrum.
We're an agency that, at the end of the day, we think of ourselves as a customer service agency. That doesn't mean that we always hit the nail on the head. We can constantly improve, but whether it's our rules, whether it's waiving certain rules, whether it's trying to find the right size and recommend the right things to the legislature to make this market more viable for smaller folks. And again, we can only make recommendations. We don't control as many keys, I think, as some folks out there may think that we do. But it's always been, how can we provide an on-ramp to as many folks that might be interested as we possibly can. And then the consumers, if they're paying attention to this type of thing, might be more encouraged to buy retail if they know that their dollars are spent supporting smaller businesses.
Comments coming in, and you can respond to any of these. Sign on the street saying "Keep government out of cannabis." Also, grow, grow, grow. We don't need dispensaries and taxes. Glenn saying, and the state is taxing them to death. Alcohol tax is 10%, I believe. Another one here. Most physicians are not on board. Let the market work. Truly legalize. Tomatoes and potatoes are grown and sold at roadside stands. Charge tax like everything else. Man, a lot of comments that are coming in here this morning. Share seeds, teach others, grow. The Department of Taxes, fiscal year 2023, there were over $58 million in taxable sales. which translates into just about $11 million in new tax revenue. This is from WCAX. In fiscal year 2024, that number jumped from $58 million. We're talking about the state of Vermont here. $58 million to $128.5 million in taxable sales, just shy of $25 million in new revenue. That money going into the general fund, which some say, very ironically, is being used to fund substance misuse prevention programming, and expand access to after-school programming. A lot to unpack here. Big numbers.
Yeah, it's hard to respond to all those comments. Just to the folks commenting, like the Cannabis Control Board does not set tax rates. We do not control where this money goes. We're here to
Thank you for saying that.
we're here to take the law as it was written. And again, I encourage all those folks to speak to their elected officials. If you want the law changed, that's the most efficient way to do so. Unfortunately, this isn't like a potato or a tomato quite yet. You can't set cannabis at the end of a farm stand with a little payment drop box and expect the same result that you get from a tomato. It's just, we're not there yet. I'm not saying that we can't get there. In fact, the control board has gone on record with the legislator to say direct sales should be a part of our program at some point. There's challenges. There's challenges there. No other state in the country does that. Again, that doesn't mean that we can't get there. We can't be the first. I hear you. But we don't set the tax rate. A portion of the excise tax does go towards substance misuse. Again, contact your legislative representatives if you're not comfortable with tax money being generated going in that direction.
Or after-school programs.
After-school programs makes more sense in some ways to some people, but hey, I'm agnostic. That's not my role. My role is to take the law and put some parameters around the law, or I guess fill in the blanks if we think about it the other way, and provide folks that there's still a lot of folks out there that don't that are not happy that cannabis is in their community. So how can we find that, I don't want to say happy medium, because I don't think we make anybody happy from that perspective, but for the folks that are anti-cannabis, like, that's fine from my perspective. I'm agnostic to that. But how can you still have faith in the regulated market that it's accomplishing what the General Assembly hope that it would, not necessarily from a tax perspective, but from a youth prevention and safety perspective. And that's partly why the governor decided to not veto the bill when, this was coming down the train, So
I think the most common thing that that I hear in simplistic terms from listeners is the state is waiting to see how much money they can figure out how they can line their pockets with legislators and the state in general before they move forward. They're going to get the biggest bang for the buck, and it's going to help them more than it's going to help the growers and the retailers. I'm sure you've heard similar sentiment.
I think, right now, one of the things we're developing a report on is how can we better help some of our social equity licensees with a permanent appropriation from the excise tax revenue that goes back into supporting certain businesses throughout our market. And in addition to that, we want to figure out how to better support small cultivators specifically. As some of the questions that you've alluded to for me, have I ever grown cannabis, so on and so forth, there's so many different skill sets that are necessary to be viable here. It's not just the ability to grow a really good product. Unfortunately, like, I come from the ag world where everybody thinks they grow the best tomato, and my tomato should sell itself. I don't need to market it. I don't need to do anything else. It should be able to sell itself. That's how good it is. And you might be right, but that's just not the full picture. So this requires a business acumen. It requires not just, I think, the ability to grow specifically or cultivate cannabis, but more understanding of agricultural markets in general. Do you know how to? A lot of folks, especially in the illicit side of things, have never done this through a regulatory lens, where they've got to pay taxes on what they're producing, and I'm gonna steer clear of the government involved in everything.
Yeah.
I'm here to do my job. But there's so many skill sets that a lot of folks just haven't developed, and they've got to develop them fast before, they go out of business. What is it, like 50% of all small businesses fail within 5 years? That's across the board, and I think that's especially heightened here with how much regulatory costs are associated with cannabis. And again, a part of that is what we do, and a part of that is the nature of this new industry, new regulated industry, kind of moving to front and center, notwithstanding its federal status.
What's the relationship here with, we've talked so much about cannabis, but what about CBD? And what about hemp? I mean, it was years ago that I sat down with Anson Tebbets and we talked about the hemp industry in Vermont.
Yeah.
Have we forgotten hemp? Have we forgotten CBD? I mean, my God, you go into a gas station now, and you can get CBD.
Well, I would caution you to those products. A lot of those products, you don't actually know what you're getting.
Amen.
That's part of the problem there. But I think you're hitting something that I think gives a lot of people anxiety with entering this market from a cultivation of cannabis, like high THC cannabis perspective, is the example of what happened with hemp. And I've said throughout this that as these things take off, things consolidate, and you need to get bigger to stay viable. I think the cost of hemp per pound for CBD purposes is $1, $2, $3 a pound. I don't think cannabis, like for high THC cannabis, is ever going to fall that. Gosh, Lord help us if it does. But I think one of the things that we're set up to do now, because it's not federally legal, is that everything that happens here happens here. With the hemp market, it was the Wild West when the Farm Bill legalized hemp and all of its derivatives. It makes it hard to compete nationally with those markets. And again, like there are some craft CBD producers and processors in Vermont that have made their way to the national level, but that's taken some time, and it's still a question of whether or not it's a viable business. I think the various use, like cannabis is such a cool plant because there's so many different uses. And I think a lot of the, I don't want to say fad type uses, whether it's CBD or otherwise, that are present in the hemp market now. I think hemp has a lot more value long term if we can figure out how to better process it at scale. It can do what all the other commodity crops can do. It has the same value in ways that corn does, as rice does, as soy does, as wheat does. It has all of these uses. There's just not a whole manufacturing sector dedicated to it like there is for these, the 5 major commodity crops around the country.
Wow.
It's, and again, will we ever get there? I don't know, but it's a once the Farm Bill legalized it, we don't even have the right agricultural equipment to harvest at scale. Like a lot of people are doing their own thing and figuring out new ways to kind of retrofit existing farm equipment to better harvest certain quantities of hemp for CBD purposes. So, I think CBD has a lot of value, and I think that the science is constantly evolving there, especially if cannabis is no longer Schedule I, it's going to unlock a lot of research capabilities. I think that was a comment or a question that you read. But I think a lot of the cannabinoidal value that we're going to see over the next 5 to 10 to 15 years depends a lot on high THC cannabis getting rescheduled. I do think that the federal government's going to reel in some of these hemp derivatives. Folks have found out ways to kind of in a laboratory setting, pull out psychoactive components of hemp that was grown for CBD purposes, hemp that was grown for non-industrial purposes, and find ways to make it psychoactive. And there's not a lot of good research on whether or not that's healthy for the human environment if you're consuming things that have been synthetically derived in a concentrated form. Mm-hmm. So there's just a lot, I think, that needs to catch up. And it's the classic trope for me that, government cannot always outpace business. Business is going to outpace government. And so there's a lot of trying to play catch up in a market that is increasingly growing in ways that folks are so creative. It's fascinating. And it's hard to keep up sometimes.
I had a friend who had his CDL, got hired by a major company to drive. Mm-hmm. This guy has never consumed THC. He's never smoked. He's never consumed an edible, but had arthritis and joint pain and was taking CBD prior to getting his CDL. Lost his CDL, lost his job from that, whatever it is, 3%. Do you have any thoughts about any of this?
I know that a lot of these types of issues are coming to the forefront across the country. There's been some cases that have been heard by or at least one case that was heard by this Vermont Supreme Court on a similar line of facts around driving a bus for VTrans, I believe, and was using not on work hours, and I think these are just, and I hate that folks come to front and center that are used from a legal perspective to kind of help understand where the kind of impacts of legalizing something new that we've thought about in a certain way as a society for 40, 50 years. And now things are switching very quickly. I don't know if I have any like real substantive thoughts other than like I acknowledge that there are lots of places throughout the state government system and the federal government that need to play catch up if they're going to regulate this as something that's legal at the state level that's going to generate new money as it is. We need to understand the practical real world implications of legalizing this at the state level. Mm-hmm. And I think that I work in state government. Not every agency thinks about this in the same way. And that's just a part of this. It's like moving an aircraft carrier. It's a slow burn. Yeah. It's not everybody let's get on the same page. Everybody let's forget about the stigma that's been created, whether it's your own stigma or something that's just been thrust upon you for so long that's what you're used to. I
think of my sister-in-law. She just you talk about stigma. I mean, it's how she's older than I am, but just how she was raised. I mean, it's just like, hey, have you tried CBD for your joint pain or whatever? Oh, hands on the ears. I can't hear that. Don't talk about that. It's the devil's grass, man. It's
interesting, and even when you're I've worked in government affairs, and on any issue, you can kind of easily identify from a political spectrum perspective where your allies and your not so friendly folks are going to be on an issue. It's easy to kind of get a certain sense of that. Cannabis, it doesn't play to the political spectrum. There are folks on either side of the aisle that love it and that hate it.
Great point.
And it's really, really challenging to kind of talk through issues with various groups of folks in a community. Because people just don't agree. on this issue.
People that are married to each other don't agree.
Yeah. So it's and again, I think it's just going to take some time. I just, I hate to say that because there are folks with their business on the line that are not able to wait for the rest of society to play catch up.
Yeah.
So, it's a really interesting time to be working in cannabis.
Your relationship, the CCB, with public safety, with law enforcement, what does that relationship look like? Do they attend your meetings? Are they privy to what you guys are discussing? Because there's, as you well know, there's a lot of concern about this. There's, I've heard many times, well, now Vermont doesn't officially have enough DREs, drug recognition expert officers, driving while impaired. I mean, there's so many people that I chat with that are like, more and more people are driving tired.
Yep.
More and more people are driving distracted in one way or another.
Sure.
Phones are more of an impairment from a distraction standpoint than smoking half a joint on your way home after work.
To some people.
To some people, very much, very true.
It's a good.
What is law enforcement saying to you guys? What are you saying to them?
So
where's the level of concern here?
We get and we ask municipal officials to help us understand the impacts of cannabis in their respective municipalities, and that goes from a zoning perspective, that goes from a fatality perspective, from a vehicle
Crash stats.
crash issue.
I get them every week.
Yeah. So, I will say that we have our own compliance team. DPS is not involved in our compliance with our licensees. We do work with liquor and lotteries field agents sometimes if there is, a suspected illicit at scale operation going on, or somebody's selling something that they shouldn't be selling at a corner store or something like that. But we don't refer a whole lot to local law enforcement. If we pull somebody's license for a number of different reasons, we might let local law enforcement know that, hey, we've done this, just so they know that this establishment no longer can carry on in the regulated market. But we do a lot of stuff in-house, and we're not out to, re-stigmatize cannabis operators. Yeah, we're really not. And so we do our best to not really make that call. But from a one of the governor's reasons for not being so head first into this, because he's a business guy, I think he sees value, is that there's no highway safety testing for cannabis yet. It doesn't synthesize in our bodies like alcohol does. Everybody is gonna feel and test differently based off of different consumption patterns. It's not the same, and I know that there's folks out there that are trying to crack that conundrum. But we get that data just because we, want to be good partners, but, we don't have any legislative authority to do anything about highway safety.
Yeah. I mean, just comment right here. We don't want either. But would you rather have someone driving high or driving drunk?
I'm not going to touch that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, I understand the commenter, and I understand what they're saying. So,
Pepper says people in Vermont use cannabis at higher rates than almost anywhere in the country. The real question was, are they willing to pay a 20% premium for regulated cannabis? And I think what we're seeing is yes, end quote.
I think if you look at the numbers and the new money that's been generated, the answer is yes. I think our modeling is a lot built on tourism, right? I mean, it's so many Vermont markets are built on tourism, and
Look
I
at
think
the craft beers.
Yeah,
My God.
and I think it's curious because a lot of our supply demand model, our tourist numbers. Well, let me back up to the illicit market. Like, I think if you were to ask folks in the illicit market, what are the big I don't want to say havens, but what are the big areas of really good illicit market cannabis? They would point to Northern California, and I bet you a lot of them would point to Vermont. Like, it just has a really healthy, historically healthy kind of illicit market, meaning they are good at what they do. They're really good at growing this plant and kind of, putting the right stress on it in a way to kind of make it beautiful.
Sure.
But it's a challenging metric because just because we are beating projections doesn't mean that the market itself is where I think it should be. I think it's not a facade, but it's only a part of the conversation. Like, where's that money being generated from? Who's, it's the classic agricultural conundrum to me. The farmers are not the ones that are always making the most money, even though they're putting their sweat equity into this. And how can we find ways to have that trickle down to the folks that are growing this, not just the folks that are selling it? And to the commenters that are asking for direct sales, you need to talk to your legislature. You need to have conversations with them. We are always trying to figure out as a board, where are we advocates and where do we just promote or where do we just make sure that, the regulated market as it stands is functional. And so there's a place for both of us to go to the legislature and make a request. But again, direct sales across agricultural markets make up 5% of somebody's total business. It's not end all be all for direct sales. I think it's another tool that should be in everybody's tool belt. But, how can we further encourage the folks that are actually growing this plant to make more money than the retailers? And, the way that things are set up through, just by the sheer nature of how you need to regulate this, it certainly benefits retailers. I don't think anybody is going to tell you otherwise.
November 15th. That's when we're going to officially tap the brakes here and put a pause on new applications for retail cannabis in the state of Vermont.
I would say, well, the 15th date was for folks that were already kind of in the application process when we announced in September, and then we gave them 5 weeks there's a lot of back and forth that you need to do with municipal officials and other agencies in state government. And so we wanted to make sure that we gave folks enough runway to make sure that they've done everything that they possibly can do in order to put themselves in the best position, with the understanding that they might be waiting on somebody else to get back to them, or waiting on another part of the process. So at the end of this, at the end of November 15th, we'll have a good understanding of how many folks have made it to the finish line from that late September announcement. And then we don't necessarily have a date in mind on when we're going to reopen retail establishments, but we've put out an RFP, a request for proposals, for an economic analysis firm to come in and look at what we've done thus far and where we can do better from a supply demand perspective. And our rules, hopefully with the population and the density and the saturation issues, should be finalized by then, no matter what they end up becoming. And we've got something on paper that should be out in the public in the next couple of weeks.
I will be watching very carefully. How long do you think this pause will last?
I think the hope is, and again, I hate to be
sure.
I think
we're not holding you to the record here. It's just a guess.
I think one of our goals is, town meeting day is a big day in Vermont for down ballot initiatives, right? It's that, and it's typically every 2 years when there's a big election. And so I think we're hoping that more of these towns that we're hoping opt in might do so on town meeting day, and we might be able to hit the ground running with some new towns and new prospective entrepreneurs in those towns as we kind of warm up in March.
Okay.
But again, don't hold me
No.
to that. A part of it is how long the regulatory process from a rulemaking perspective takes. We need to file proposed rules with the Secretary of State. We need to hold hearings on those rules. We need to solicit public input. They need to be open and available to the public for X amount of days in order to give people the opportunity to think and comment on those. And then we need to have conversations with the Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules. And the governor has his own committee on making sure that what you're putting into a rule fits the legislative mandate. So there's a lot of procedural steps to make sure that what we're doing is in fact what the legislature has asked us to do. But I think importantly, it's keeping certain things open for a long time so that the public can weigh in and take their time to weigh in on if they think what we're trying to accomplish fits what they think the market should look like, this specific issue should look like. There will be not a lot, but there will be some substantive changes to other parts of our rulemaking program too. So there's just a lot to...
Will you stay in touch with me?
Sure.
I'll be watching the news too.
Yeah. You know how to find me.
Everything you guys are doing, I'll be paying very, very close attention to.
All right.
Thank you so much for coming in here.
You're very welcome.
Kyle Harris is one of the commissioners with the Cannabis Control Board, the CCB, right here in the Green Mountain State. Again, thank you so much for all of your time. You answered a lot of questions. I'm sure many Vermonters will have many more questions. So if you get a chance in your busy schedule, have a gander at the page here and see the comments coming in.
Yeah, check out our website. Join our public meetings. They're last Wednesday of every month. We take public comment at the beginning of every single meeting. Your input is extremely valuable to us, and my hope always is we can disagree. That's totally fine. We can have different opinions. That's human nature, but we need to do so under the same set of facts.
We need some really good solutions.
Yeah,
too.
and I think nobody at the board is so presumptuous that we think we have all the answers. So all your input is valuable.
ccb.vermont.gov.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much, Kyle.
Thank you.
Appreciate everything.
Absolutely.
Thanks to our sponsors, which we have a large number of who support the Aired Out podcast, and we appreciate and love each and every one of them. Thanks for tuning in. Tomorrow morning, yes, we're going to be back sitting right here beginning at 9 o'clock. News, weather, sports, everything, and community events. Keep watching the page. We've got it all for you. Thanks for liking. Thanks for following. Thanks for sharing any episode that you enjoy here at Aired Out. I'm JD Green. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.